I'm Eric Chemi, and this is Politely Pushy. Welcome to Politely Pushy. As always, I'm your host, Eric Chemi. Today, we've got a special episode. We have three of my colleagues here from Bospar. They're fresh off of their trip to CES, and we're going to talk about what happened, what were the crazy things they saw that they didn't see that they were expecting to, advice for next year, mistakes that they might have made, but maybe they won't want to share those. But this is a special episode because we're going to really dig into what's going on, when you're in the building, when you're in those meetings, when you're in the peripheral events, what's happening and how can companies best position themselves to get the most attention? Whether you're a small company looking to fight the big guys or you're one of the big guys yourself, how do you get maximum attention for your investment and for your spend going to CES and making sure it's worthwhile? So we've got Greg down at the bottom, we've got Brent, we've got Tiny. They're all here. You were all there. So thanks for joining me. I'm going to start with Brent to tell me what was most surprising for you this year at CES.
Surprising and not surprising, but all the attention given to AI, which we kind of knew was going to happen. But day one kickoff with the keynote, CEO of NVIDIA announces their supercomputing device. So it kind of hijacked everything because they're the big 800-pound gorilla in almost every room right now. And for us, our clients aren't in that realm. Most of them that were attending CES anyway aren't in that realm of database AI. So we had to rethink a little bit. But after about 24 hours of that news cycle, things kind of went back to normal.
Yeah, you're shaking your head, Greg. Yeah, let's see what you got. You're nodding.
Yeah, that was one thing too, and also one thing that I found surprising was the amount of content creators that was there, as opposed to media in terms of ratio. I saw a lot of folks walking around with expensive DSLR cameras and stabilizers, coming around taking videos, that sort of stuff. Didn't really see a lot of the traditional media there, especially the first day, because they were probably all there with the NVIDIA announcements, covering all the other AI stories, that sort of thing. So it was a surprise to sort of see that gradual shift of every day. We kind of saw more and more reporters, traditional reporters, as opposed to the first couple of days where they were looking for, the digital creators were looking for the glitz and the glam, but the traditional media was on the boots on the ground, covering some of the most important stories that were there. So we saw them trickle in as the week went in.
Yeah,
I would agree with that. Oh, go ahead, Tiny.
No, I was just gonna say something that Brent said. He said everything, AI was a trending topic, and it was almost as if if you didn't have AI, you couldn't show anything at CES. I don't think there was one booth that didn't have an AI product there, and it was just so surprising that AI is such a trendy topic that there's nothing without AI. And what even is the extent of AI with some of these products? What exactly does AI mean in a world like today?
Yeah, I would say that, although Greg brought up a little bit more concentration of the content creators, especially YouTubers, at this conference, which we've seen more recently. But I would agree, even to the point where media were armed and ready with their little cameras and stuff, shooting a lot of B-roll, where normally in the past, they would come do their interviews, but now they're probably working for their entire staff. So they're pulling B-roll and helping the content creators on their teams, assemble all of those assets so they can do those stories online, but as well, they're serving their social teams. So that was kind of interesting. The main client that Greg and I were representing was not an AI client at all. It's traditional audio, and we were right in the middle, right in the thick of all of the AI that was happening on the entertainment side. Our booth, Greg, was next to Panasonic, Hisense, TCL, Samsung. So here's this little bitty company right in the middle of all these companies that definitely had a huge stake in the trend of AI, as well as a lot of TVs and that type of thing, which was kind of the play for our client to make that big investment and get their product into the conversation with what is happening in the home theater market. It was a good move. It just, however, like Greg said, it took about 24 hours for that news cycle to get over with before the media started dropping in and paying attention to what we were doing.
Yeah, and with the addition of all of the content creators that were there, um, our client did a really good job of having this booth that had attractions that would have people come to the booth. So they had this massive art installation that was in the middle of their booth, and a lot of people would just stop by. There were reporters that were getting their B-roll there. They were finishing their recaps there. They were doing a lot of different sort of different ways of capturing videos and content just in that installation, and they would have never known about who our client was before, but then they stop by and then they might ask a couple questions of like, oh, who are you guys, what do you guys do, oh, that's super interesting, I would like to learn more. So that was something that we saw as well too with the digital content creators, and what was sort of successful on our end, just based off of what was there aesthetically wise.
Yeah, and I saw that in different halls too. Like they were segmented. The specific hall where Greg and Brent were, there were all the big names. I think they named a few like Hisense, TCL, but there are other halls where the booths were a little bit smaller. And one booth I saw doing particularly well was Segway, because they had the actual um, electric scooter where everyone could go around on a track. Everyone was filming, so that did really well. Is anything that had, our client E3 that had an AI badminton trainer, so a bunch of reporters and content creators stopped by to try and play badminton, even if it was their first time. And for me, I had to play in my heels, which, as an FYI, do not wear heels to CES. Even if you think you'll feel good, you won't.
Not wearing heels. Yes, that's funny. Go ahead, Brent.
Oh, I was going to say, I missed the Segway thing. That would have been pretty cool. My earlier days in PR, we had Segways in the office, so that was kind of cool. So did they make you sign an insurance waiver? Because I saw it's kind of...
Well, okay. So I did think about doing that in my heels too, but the insurance waiver looked a little too intense. So considering I wasn't going to walk away with a few $1,000s if I had fallen, I didn't do it. But the people who did do it, they had different camera angles. There was a huge line for it. And even not... we're speaking about things that you can do, but also just giveaways. A bunch of people stood in line for free skateboards. I mean, I personally have never been to a conference where they're giving away free skateboards, but it was just crazy to see the different goodies you could get. Like there are fedoras from Red Hat. There are all these neon bags that
were they red? Were the fedoras red?
Yeah.
Okay, I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was cute. They're good. They're well thought out, and it's surprising to see people stand in line for hours to get a free skateboard when we could probably order one from Amazon. So there is something behind like how much pull you have with a giveaway.
I like what you said.
And I think we see that every year. It was probably the same company I was giving away skateboards last year because it was super popular. They were right in the thick of like the VR and virtual reality.
Yeah, honestly, I don't even
presentations.
I don't even know what they do. I just know there was a big sign that said free skateboard, and I was like, oh, if I had more time, I probably would have stood in line and tried to take a skateboard home with my one carry-on bag that I had on Delta. But, it was interesting to see that CES is not just a tech conference, but they had Steve Aoki playing I think it was, I don't remember which booth it was, but he was playing right next to where Brent and Greg were. And it was just, the whole thing is almost a festival.
There's a lot of entertainment value for sure,
Yeah.
and because there's so much to take in, it's almost necessary. Like even in the booth that Greg and I were representing, Facetto, one of our clients, they're very niche. They provide audio through power lines, which is very interesting when you think about it. Instead of running speaker wires all over your house, use those existing power lines to send your audio to your source. Um, and media found that incredibly interesting, almost to the point where they didn't believe it. If Greg remembers, we had some deniers, including some from top tier, but seeing and hearing is believing, and that was kind of the cool draw that this very small company knew. They were prepared for it, and they knew it was going to happen. They even had this really cool like Lego display where there was all the different steps, and you looked at this Lego house that was all set up. And I personally found that display, outside of all the different kind of real displays that they had, a great way to tell the story, especially to media that were just trying to suck it all in and understand what the technology does. Just running them through the little Lego display kind of told the story really quickly, and then all of a sudden a light bulb would go on. Then, of course, our big hurdle was we had some deniers there that just didn't believe that it could happen without ruining the quality of the audio. So that in essence, you would think that's a huge issue, but it actually worked to our advantage because it kept those top tier folks in the booth wanting to learn more.
Yeah, I think if you're a company who's teetering on whether I should exhibit at CES, whether I should go, I think Paseta was a great proof point and example of why you should go, especially if you have amazing technology, if you believe in technology, if you think what you're doing is very innovative and will capture and resonate with the media. It's definitely something that you should do. I know a lot of our media interest and the responses we've been getting from reporters leading up to CES was, there's no way, I don't believe this. The reporters that would come up and were intrigued by the booth as well too would come chat with us and say, what do you guys do? And we would explain that story of sound over power lines, or the main thing that they were saying was shut the heck up. Like there's no way this is true. So we'd go around to the different demos, show them the different products, and then they become a believer all of a sudden. Then they want to start learning more about the product, and they want to stay updated on, some of the press releases and the news that you guys have. So it's a good way to develop relationships with reporters who were doubters, because there's only so much you can say in an email. But once you actually go ahead and see it in person, or hear it in person in Facetto's case, then it's totally a different ballgame, and you open yourself up to a wider range of reporters who you probably never would have heard of before, because it's just words on a screen rather than hearing it to believe it.
Do you find that you need to go chase reporters down, or it's like if you stand there, people will come to you?
It's more if you stand there, people will come to you. I know reporters are really busy, and they're going from booth to booth because they're on tight schedules as well too. And I don't want to just go up there and interrupt them. But if they're curiously looking around the booth, then we'll ask them how they're doing, if they have any questions, if they want to learn more about the specific client. But it's nothing we really press on per se, because we want to respect the reporter's time, and we want to respect their attention and what they're doing. But if they come with a curious look, or if they come up to us, we'll definitely give them the spiel of what the company does and why this is important, and why you should listen to them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's the tactic. They especially the veteran reporters that are there, they know when somebody's trying to hunt them down. It can work, but it's a better tactic when they're really close to your booth. At least if they look inside the booth, that's an open door and a reason to offer them, to get them more information and to pull them in. It works really well. I would say like last year I was there representing a lot bigger company, very well known. So it was, and they had 100 different computer peripherals. So you're almost just as a consumer, you're almost familiar with a lot of the things that were in the booth because you use them every day, like a dock for your computer system or a backpack or something like that. Where in this case, it was a little bit more difficult because it was such a niche product. So that's why, as I said earlier, it was really important for this little guy in the giant consumer land to stand out with the things that they had in the booth, and it was very well thought out ahead of time. At the same time, we work closely with the client, and they really wanted our opinion from our experience on what wasn't working. So we had little huddles, took some notes, and then we're planning in the next couple weeks to do a recap with them and decide how we can make it better in the coming year, because while we were there, they went ahead and signed on to do an even bigger booth next year.
How do you know who to avoid? Who's a time waster? When I hear the story about people standing in line for skateboards, I think these people, I can't waste my time with these people, right? If you have that much time to stand in line for a free skateboard, then you're not important enough to probably be doing important work there. So like, how do you like weed out the people who are, they're the leeches of the conference, and focus your time on like people that are going to get your goals accomplished?
Well, it depends what your goals are. Like, is your goal to get more media attention? Then obviously speak to reporters. Maybe at the conference is not the right time, but everyone's in Vegas at this time, going to get dinner, sitting at the bar. You'll probably have a reporter on either side of you. Are you a business trying to find a partner, trying to, expand your business to find the right investor? So it really depends on who you're trying to find. There are a lot of people who go to these trade shows simply because they're interested in technology. And, they might not be who I'm targeting at the time, but it doesn't mean that they're not useful for someone else. All these companies need an audience, and they are the audience.
Yeah, I think it depends on your situation as well. Like, for example, the company that Greg and I were there to represent for most of our time there, they don't even have a product that's available to the public. So it's not even there yet. As a matter of fact, that was a huge question that we had to answer to, especially the major media, because they understand how much money it costs to have a booth right in the middle of this highly congested area with these big consumer giants, and we don't even have a product to sell. So that actually worked in our favor. It was a conversation starter, but like Tiny said, it depends on what your goals are. A lot of times there's a bunch of new products that are being released, so you want to bring awareness to those, immediately, and that's why you're there. If you don't have news and you're at CES, then that's the time to give away skateboards. So you pull people in your booth, and you can just talk about what's going on and maybe what's coming in the new year. A lot of times these products aren't ready for prime time when CES happens, and they might be happening later in the year. So a lot of times you'll see stunts like that, or we saw a lot of celebrities, football players, basketball players. Hisense had the NBA trophy and the FIFA trophy across the way. TCL had the Lombardi trophy. So those are big draws. And it's not to say those two big companies didn't have things going on, because they did. But, you want to keep people in your booth somehow. So a lot of times having that extra draw is the key, because when your booth is super busy, you don't have enough people to talk to all the media all at once. So you want to occupy them until you have time to get your message out.
Yeah.
And then,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and then just like one thing to add from there to the different people have different badges in terms of media and who's attending, who's an industry person, who's an analyst, and they're all different color coded. So just if you were going back to your question a little bit, you can easily kind of tell, who's the media person that's walking in, who's an industry person, who's just an attendee, and then that way you can kind of prioritize your time a little bit of who you want to talk to when they come over to the booth, or if there's people that you want to hand off to someone who might be, a decision maker because they're looking to do collaborations, or they want to do a little bit of investor meetings or something like that. They have all those different kinds of people that will stop by the booth, and so that way you can kind of hand them off to those different people that could answer those specific questions. But if there's reporters, Brent and I would want to, have those conversations initially and then set them up if they want to learn a little bit more with other people that are there too. So then there's that the color coding of sort of who's there, and the badges that can kind of tell us, who we kind of need to talk to in the moment.
Yeah, something great to think about as an attendee. I was there on behalf of Bospar, just understanding the new trends in tech and understanding what's up and coming. CES is so large. It is huge, and you only have a few days to go through all the halls. So something that is great is that, most reporters are at CES writing about the big companies, writing about the big names. So I prioritize my time and looked at smaller booths, smaller companies, because they don't usually get as much media attention, and really understanding the new trends and stuff from these smaller booths, and then going, I did go to the big booths. They're shiny and they're big, so I was going to stop by, and I did do a quick glaze. I was like, oh, this is cool, but I mainly read all the news back in my hotel room from TechCrunch, from Forbes, from wherever it was. And then I got to learn more about the industry from the smaller booths, where they had people who could speak to me, who they could tell me about their technology, tell me what they're working on too. And that's how I kept informed as an attendee. And hopefully I'll be able to use this with my work at Bospar.
You mentioned, Greg, who should go or not go. You hinted at that earlier. I'm curious from all of you, who do you think should not go? What kind of company would you say, don't go to CES? It's not worth the investment. You'll just get gobbled up by everything else going on.
So it's funny that you asked that question, because I was just thinking about what kind of PR person doesn't need to go. We got one of our clients, they're called eTree, and they do have an element of AI in their business. But our team actually handled eTree being at the conference remotely. They were still able to get coverage in. I'm reading the list here. It's amazing. Fast Company, Fox News, Reuters, Tech Radar, Digital Trends, NASDAQ, CNET, Tom's Guide, without having boots on the ground. So I think it really depends on your situation. Like for our situation, and if the company, and not to answer your question, but more on from the PR aspect of it, we needed to be there. The company needed us to be there. In eTree's situation, they didn't. Our teams were able to handle it remotely, and do a good job, and still bring that brand awareness and media attention. As far as the companies that should go and shouldn't go, it really depends on, I think, the trends. Like if you're really trending, you have the funding to do it, but you're fairly small. Faceto is a really good example of why you spend that money and you go. They're about ready to kick off and go live with something that is totally different and unique to a huge industry. And they wanted to show that off, and they spent the money and made the investment to do it. I would say where that money probably isn't well spent is when AI is this huge thing going on, and you have this little facet of AI in the industry. You're going to get buried, and you might be better off not going to the event and choose a smaller event where you can stand out.
Yeah, and just to add to that too, it also kind of depends what you're looking for too. If you're going there to maybe make some deals, talk to some investors, meet with some other key decision makers, that could be a good place to do some collaboration and partnerships. But if as a company you might not be ready for that yet, or you're a little bit farther away from going to market, or as Brent said, if you feel like you're going to get drowned out a little bit with some of the news that you have, it might not be the best. So there's always different reasons to go or to not go, but it's just depending on what the company's current goals are for the following year, or what their future roadmap is for their company as well too.
What do you think about advice for next year? What did you guys all learn? You think, okay, if AI is taking over the world and the current direction of the conference and what you're seeing and what's going on, what's your advice for different, whether you're a professional in this industry or one of the technology companies there, what do you look for next year?
Yeah, if I was on the PR side, if for next year, I would advise all of our clients to try to have their priority meetings as early in the morning as possible, because around 11 to 12, that's when the big companies are going to make their announcements. That's when all the big reporters are going to be away. They're going to be at different booths. Maybe you're at Central Hall, then they're at the Venetian Expo 10 minutes away. That ends up turning into 30 minutes with the traffic sometimes. And then that ends up becoming a domino effect. So if you have a meeting at 2 with a reporter, there's a good chance they might not stop by until like 4. They might go on their way to your booth. They might see something that intrigues them because the reporters are naturally curious. So that ends up getting in the way. So we've seen that a lot of the early morning meetings that we've had sort of stuck in terms of scheduling. But as we got later in the day, there seemed to have been more, I'm going to be late, or no shows, or didn't have time to come at all, and they could get washed in just the massiveness of CES. So would definitely encourage them to, or as on the PR side, to try to schedule those top tier and those folks you really think are going to make the biggest impact in the morning. And then in terms of what the company should do,
are they awake in the morning though? It's funny. A lot of times,
yeah. You would be surprised.
You hear people say don't do the morning because they're not awake, but it's interesting. Your data shows, or your anecdotes or your experience, your only hope of getting them is first thing. If it's not first thing, it may not happen at all.
Even before the show opens, on the Tuesday, CES technically opened at 10, but we had an interview with a top tier reporter scheduled at 9, and he was able to show up, and he was like, yeah, I have my keynote in a couple of hours. And then I was doing all this, and we also just, were able to send him things afterwards, and weren't able to, necessarily hear back sometimes. So then that way we already kind of knew he was caught up in the wash. And we also had Brett and I had some top tier reporters that were scheduled to come later in the day, like 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock. And they ended up not being able to make it as well too. But the ones we had in the morning were always there. So even though it's Vegas and that city is another city that never sleeps, reporters were up bright early, and so were we.
Yeah, I think the other thing that you want to do, especially if you're kind of a medium-sized fish in a big pond, is you try to, like Greg said, get prepared, get ahead, try to do pre-briefings before the conference ever starts. So at least you get that part out of the way. You're part of their news cycle. They're still going to include you, even if they haven't physically seen you. They might still include you in their best of show report if they like what your product is. And then usually if they really like what your product is and you've done that pre-briefing, they're still going to stop by the booth. So you can really nurture that relationship because they like you and they like what they heard in the pre-brief. That's really the key, is to get ahead of the actual show itself. It'll also give you a pretty good indication of what your show is going to be like, because you've already created that interest. So it might give you an opportunity to kind of change your messaging right before the show, or get a couple of releases out if what you've done ahead of the show isn't quite hitting.
And don't wear high heels, right?
No more high heels. But I think Greg and Brent wrapped it up pretty well. Definitely make sure you're scheduling your briefings ahead of CES. maybe even a month before CES, just because the reporters we did speak to, they had a schedule already. They were going from booth to booth to booth. They had maybe 5 minutes in between, and it was very much to run between the briefings. So as a PR person, definitely start prepping early, get all your news out early, and then just enjoy your briefings when you're there.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for holding the flag there, or planting the flag, something like that. For doing that and coming back and sharing your notes, and good luck, and maybe you'll be there next year.
Thank you. It's always fun to be one of 140,000 people all in one place.
Yeah, like a lot of personal attention. Exactly.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you to my guest, and thanks for listening. Subscribe to get the latest episodes each week, and we'll see you next time.